Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of Enter the Void. Today we're going to be talking about my musical journey, and it's going to be a fun ride. I'm excited to be back. I took some time to reflect on my experience with recording the last episode and how I felt afterward. And by taking some time, I mean half of a day, because this is the same day that I recorded the first episode. And yeah, I feel good. I'm excited. I have some more things to share. I wrote some notes during episode 1 just about some other things that I'd like to talk about. And one of those things was my musical journey. I remember bringing it up very, very briefly, and I made a note of it. It's definitely something important for me to come back to, because it explains a lot about me, and I also think it'll be good for me to talk through it again, and that'll help me kind of break things down and process things and maybe see things in a new way. I do have my dog in here with me. She is laying on the couch with her head on my knee, because she's a sweetheart, and she really didn't want to be left without me for half an hour. So here we are. I want to start off at the beginning. I want to talk about my early creativity. Again, just as a recap, those of you who haven't listened to my music, I am an alternative pop. Wow, pop. I need a pop filter, speaking of that. I'm an alternative pop songwriter and producer. I've been making music for over 10 years now, but I only started releasing music late last year, which would be in August of 2022. So, with that being said, I did have some early bursts of creativity and some early creative outlets that I want to share with you guys, mainly because I forget about them and it'd be good for me to revisit, but also because it's always cool to look back in your past. I do remember, growing up, Sundays were a day with very limited activities, and one of the activities that I could do on Sunday was draw and write. And I distinctly remember being about, 5 or 6, maybe I was 6. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and I took this little, I took some notebook paper and I folded it, and I'm pretty sure I stapled it. So I would fold it in half and staple it to kind of make some binding for a little book. And it was like a couple pages, and then they were folded in half, and I made a book out of it. And I remember taking a pencil outside, and I was laying in the grass. I was laying, on my stomach in the grass, kind of propped up, and I was drawing. And I can't do this anymore, by the way. For some reason, I get like a raging headache every single time I lay on my stomach. And I'm propped up like that. I know some people could work on their laptop or read a book like that. It'd make my head explode. So can't do it anymore, but I don't remember it hurting back then. So something changed. But anyway, I was in the grass. I was under this tree. I remember there being 4-leaf clovers and dandelions and probably some worms or something. And I remember everything was so bright and so vivid and so clear. I remember how colorful the world was back then. And it's not like that anymore. It's crazy because I'm pretty sure recently I saw something about a study that was done that shows that children actually do see color more vividly, and your vision dulls over time, which makes perfect sense because I remember, being 6 years old And yeah, I may have been 5 or 6, just laying there. I remember everything was so raw. And I felt like I was a part of everything. And it's odd how you begin to feel disconnected the older you get. Definitely want to... I'm here again making notes, by the way. So I'm going to just write that down. From world. Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic. So, yeah, everything was just so green, and the sun was so... It wasn't hot, like it was going to burn me, but it was just... The heat was very... It had a lot of depth. Like, there was depth to the heat that I was experiencing from the sun, and it was like warming up my soul. And I've never really like reflected on this moment too much, but yeah, it was so vivid, and I can almost like just reach into the past right now and like touch it. That's how raw it was. And man, I miss that. I was laying there just writing a little story, a little book about something. I think it was about bugs, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure my mom would be able to tell you what I was making in that book if she remembers. But either way, just writing a little story and maybe drawing some pictures of some bugs or the grass or probably the backyard. Yeah, this was a good time. And yeah, I just remember enjoying drawing and enjoying being outside and enjoying writing from a really young age. I remember being able to tie my shoes when I was like 2 years old. I was pretty ahead of my class in reading, so I really enjoyed reading, and of course that fueled my writing. So yeah, I had a little bit of creativity going on. I wasn't really great at visual arts like drawing or painting, but I still enjoyed it. And that's okay as a kid to not be good at everything. So yeah, that was like really early on. And as I got older, so my brother was born when I was 6. I was not happy about it because I shared a room with my parents pretty much up until I was 3. And then when my sister came along at 3 years old, we shared a room. And then when my brother came along 3 years later, I shared a room with him, and she got her own room. And yeah, I pretty much was always sharing a room with somebody. So I was kind of bummed that my sister didn't get to share a room with the baby, and I did. But anyway, my brother came along when I was 6, and ever since then we were pretty close. Like, as we got older, and older I mean, maybe like I'm 12 and he's 6, or I'm 13 and he's 7. I remember a lot of my imagination started to display itself in writing and drawing. So what we would do is we would go outside all the time, all day. We did not have cable, so I did not grow up watching SpongeBob and shows like that. Like, no Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, nothing. I know a lot of kids that I grew up with that would just quote cartoons they grew up with constantly, and I was always in the dark about it. I just had no idea what anyone was talking about. And because we had no cable, what other choice do you have but to either do something creative or go outside? And outside was typically our after school choice and our weekend choice. So, fast forwarding from when I was 6 and my brother was born to probably when I was like 8. Yeah, I'm just going to say like 8 or 9. My brother is about 3 or 4 at this point. And this is around the same time that I would have those late night talks with my mom. So if you haven't heard episode 1, I encourage you to listen to that first, and that might give you some more context. But yeah, it's around that time, and we would run around outside. We would pretend, typically it was fantasy based, so we would pretend that we were, warriors fighting these evil monsters. We would climb up in trees and pretend that we're like, we have a bow and arrow and we're like shooting these things down. Or sometimes we would pretend that we were on an alien planet with low gravity, and it was always fun. I can imagine one of my parents looking out the window, just like, we probably look so dumb, but that's cool. You're supposed to look dumb as a kid, and I think you should look dumb as an adult too and not be worried about it, but we are. So yeah, like, we would pretend there's zero gravity, huge like ray guns and stuff that we would imagine. And it's so crazy looking back, because I know his imagination is the same. He's actually got a YouTube channel, my brother does, and he uses it in his channel still to this day. So I know that his imagination has not gone anywhere, and I don't think mine has either. I tend to get along with boys that age really well, because I haven't lost my imagination. I'm able to play like monsters and robots with my brother-in-laws or my brothers or whatever. So, but yeah, I do remember it just being very vivid back then as well. I could just construct an entire world within the world that I lived in, and just get myself immersed into it. And so yeah, that was another creative outlet for me, and physical too, because you get to get outside and you're running for your life away from these monsters or zombies or whatever it might be that's chasing you, and you got to go save the kingdom. So this barn that was near our property, we would pretend that it was like a spaceship, like a hub for other spaceships, or we'd pretend it's a castle or whatever. We would never really go inside, but yeah. So around this time, of course, with all this, imagining that I was doing, after school on the weekends while I'm outside, it translated pretty well over to writing. And one of the reasons for that is because whenever you're acting something out, it's easier to whenever you say something out loud, right? You exclaim something, or you're describing to your brother like what these monsters do and what they look like. It's a lot easier to see the things that are stupid and don't make sense, or that just don't sound good, or it's easier for you to see plot holes and stuff because you're acting it out. And if you're acting something out and it doesn't make sense, it breaks the immersion. It's harder to stay in character if it doesn't make sense. And so that's why I feel really bad for, when there's like a good actor in a movie, but the script is horrible and it's just like a really cringy movie. And no matter how good of an actor they are, it can't be saved. That's kind of what it's like when you're, outside imagining things. It's got to make sense for you to be immersed into it. And I think that doing that helped me write short stories. I still have my really old Google Drive with these old short stories. I did want to write a book, like a full-length fantasy novel at one point, and maybe I'll do it someday. It's not my biggest priority, but yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think that I was pretty decent at the world building side of things, and I had a lot of great inspiration. I remember reading Aragon and the Beyonders, Narnia, lots of fantasy like that. So my creativity was definitely centered around story creation and writing and world building and things like that. So I remember really enjoying that, and that got me through some really hard times in my childhood. And it also was the thing that helped me and my brother bond. So I look back fondly at that, because, there were some other things going on in my life at that time that were really difficult, but writing stories and going outside with my brother always helped me cope. So I, to this day, like whenever I go and visit my family, my brother is almost 18 now, which is crazy. That just makes me feel old. But yeah, we'll hang out outside and, we'll play games. And I just, I definitely want to do an episode about how, like, what it's like to grow up and how adults mistake maturity for boredom. So I already made that note, but this is about my musical journey, right? And we're talking about early creativity. Naturally, I'm writing stories, I'm world building, I'm, just writing a lot and reading a lot. And I developed a love for poetry. I thought it was very interesting, like making things rhyme and having a pace and a tempo. And, we did like a little poetry section in English. I think it was 6th and 7th grade, or maybe it was 7th grade. I can't remember. And yeah, like I was like, dude, poetry is pretty cool. So I started writing poems, and I started to get good at that. Good is obviously relative, because I was, 10 or 11, but that's besides the point. I enjoyed writing poetry. So this led to the next phase of my creativity, which is when things like really started to change for me. I want to dive deeper into some of the specifics here on maybe a different episode, because there is a lot to unpack when talking about especially the time of my life where I actually started writing music, and the time in my life where I stopped writing music. So I definitely want to make this a couple parts, because I think it would be good to provide some more detail and context. And also, again, this is a way for me to process things and to cope. And I don't want to skip over something just because it's hard to talk about. Just to summarize, what I'm going to cover in maybe part 2 and part 3 is I was in a really, really low place in my life. This is around when I was 12. So I was in 7th grade, 12 years old. Bullying was getting worse. It was already pretty bad in elementary school. And I'll provide some details on that someday. But it was pretty rough in elementary school already. It started getting worse in middle school. And I think in my opinion, everything gets worse in middle school, because like you start to go into puberty, and no one knows what the hell's going on with their body and their mind. And you pair all of that stuff with some religious things going on in my life as well. And it was just a really tough time. I felt invisible. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to hide. I actually was like straightening my hair by this point in 7th grade. I have curly hair. I don't know if you've seen, if you follow me on Instagram at NOLAN.VOID music, you'll see I have curly hair. I didn't have as curly hair back at this time. It was more wavy, but like I was straightening my hair, and it was pretty bad. But I was doing it because I was trying to cover my eyes. Like I didn't want to look at anybody, and I didn't want anybody to look at me. And there's a lot of other things to unpack about this time in my life, but it was really, really dark, and music came into my life at just the right time. I discovered Pandora, and it changed everything. Pandora changed my life. It's crazy, because Pandora is not even really that big of a deal anymore. But yeah, I discovered Pandora, and from there, I heard a couple songs on the radio that I liked. I remember hearing Break Even by The Script. That was a song I really liked. How to Save a Life by The Fray. That was a song I was a big fan of. Let's see here. I believe it's September by Daughtry. That was like a really important song to me. So I heard a couple of those songs on the radio, and I was like, okay, I think I like The Script, I guess. I don't really know anything. So I typed The Script into Pandora, and it created The Script Radio. And I'm telling you guys, that radio, it changed my life. It actually saved my life. I discovered Coldplay and Lifehouse and One Republic, especially their Dreaming Out Loud album. I discovered, in my mind, so much music, right? I still to this day am very uncultured when it comes to music and all of the different artists out there. But to me, it was like opening up Pandora's box, because it was just like all of this music that made me feel heard. It made me feel seen. It made me feel worth something. And so yeah, I started listening to this music, and it changed my life. So much to the point where there was one time, again, this is a very dark time in my life. I felt just empty and worthless. But it was after church one day. I was sitting down at a piano. My family always took forever to leave church, so I was just sitting at a piano at church in one of the rooms, and I remember having the Crazy Frog song stuck in my head. And so I was like, before I could even realize what was happening, I was plinking around, playing the Crazy Frog song. Just my two index fingers, just bum 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 ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum. I started figuring it out by ear, and the rest is history. I realized that I could play things by ear. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know what I was doing or how I was doing it, but I figured out Axel F, or the Crazy Frog song, just by ear, and I got it down really fast. Did it sound amazing? No. Was my tempo probably not super great? Yes. But I figured it out, and that was it was effortless for me. And there, yeah, my dog is curling up in her little ball. So it was effortless for me, and it was enjoyable, and that was really eye-opening for me. And over the course of a few weeks, I started playing around on the piano, and I realized that I could make things sound good, and I could just make things, just create these melodies and these riffs, and play these chords. And I would look up YouTube videos on how to play Hall of Fame by The Script, or How to Save a Life by The Fray. I would look up how to play those songs, and that was really helpful to just kind of learn some music that was already established. But aside from that, there were no lessons, nothing like that. I was just started teaching myself how to play by ear, and it quickly turned into me creating these pieces of music. And if you remember earlier, I was mentioning how I fell in love with poetry a little while before this. So that's a pretty obvious next step, is I've already been writing poetry. Now I'm creating pieces of music. I didn't know music theory. I couldn't actually, when I say write music, I hope you know what I mean by that, is not actually composing and writing on sheet music, but just creating music and writing lyrics to it and writing songs, right? So when most people say they write music, that's what they mean. There are some composers that literally like compose the music and write it on sheet music, but that was not me. So yeah, writing music was an obvious, easy transition for me. And it actually was so easy, and it happened so fast that it was just like, I remember in the span of a couple months, I had written like 10 songs. Now, would these songs be able to stand on their own, and would anyone listen to them now? No. Like, I was 12, 13. Like, they weren't that great. But looking back, for a 12-year-old, I think they were pretty good. And I was getting the basics, and I was practicing, and I was learning, and I loved it. And that's really the thing, is like, I was starting to fall in love with something for real, like something that I really was like, whoa, I think I'm actually good at this. I mentioned in episode 1, again, if you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. I mentioned briefly how I always came like second place in school. And it's true. Like, I did track and field in middle school. So at this time, I was doing track and field. And I could never cop a gold medal at the track meets. I just couldn't. It was always silver or bronze. And it was just really, really frustrating. And so I started writing music around this time. I may have been like 13, 14, so it's kind of moving into like freshman year. It's a little blurred timeline-wise, but I started writing music. I do think it was freshman year, now that I'm thinking about it. So 14. And I was actually good at it. And I would show a couple friends like what I was doing. They were like, dude, like, what the heck? This is crazy. This is cool. And it was just like nothing that I had ever experienced in my life. Like, it was crazy. And so the first song that I actually wrote, I wrote it for a girl that I really liked. And I was going to perform it for the talent show. And I did. This is the craziest thing that little me could have done, because I was shy, unless you knew me really well. I was shy. I was insecure. I was not confident. And all of those things held true when I went on stage. However, even though I was nervous, it kind of felt right. It was like the first thing in a long time where I that gave me some sort of glimmer of hope. And I performed this song for this girl. I even dedicated it to her before I started playing it. And yeah, I was just like, it was amazing. You know, after the talent show, I was going to ask her to be my girlfriend. So, of course, my mind was like there, and I was wanting to just find her and ask her to be my girlfriend. I did do that, and she did not answer me. She ran away and didn't say anything. And then 2 weeks later, she finally said yes, and then the relationship was just rocky from there on out. And it was just a dumb freshman year relationship. But anyway, after the talent show, aside from the fact that my mind was really preoccupied with asking this girl to be my girlfriend, I did get a lot of really good feedback. And I wish that I was not obsessing over some stupid girl and instead was soaking it up, because, man, did that feel good. Like, again, at a time where I felt just hopeless and worthless and invisible, and bullying was just getting worse and worse and worse. And this is up until freshman year, right? Like, I finally had people acknowledging my existence, and like people in grades above me, seniors, coming up to me being like, dude, like, that was really good. Like, keep it up. Don't stop. It gave me a lot of hope, and it lifted my spirits. And literally after writing that first song and performing it at the talent show, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm meant to do with my life. And yeah, I continued writing music. I was, just like writing all the time. Sometimes I would write a song in like a week. It would take me a little bit to figure out the composition and the piano melody. There were other songs I wrote in like half an hour, and sometimes those were the best ones. And if you're a musician listening to this, then that's the case even as an adult. Like sometimes sometimes you write a song and, bless my heart, sometimes you write a song and you rush it, right? And like, you're like, you got to force yourself to slow down because it's just rushed and it's not as good as it could be. And other times it just, like, God, the universe, whatever, is downloading this shit into your brain. And it's like very fast. And it's like flowing out of your hands into whatever instrument you play, or it's flowing out of your mouth as lyrics, or flowing onto the page. And it's like you are not in control. You do not have the reins. And I wrote some songs like that where it was just pure inspiration, and it really had nothing to do with me. I was just organizing it, and the music was already there. So yeah, my family, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but yeah, that is like my musical journey up until that point. I continued writing music throughout high school, and I continued to get better at it. I tried to put myself out there a few times with like, I opened for a local band for this benefit concert that they did. I did like 2 songs for it. I know there are people out there that remember me as that kid that just was up there playing the piano, and not like, I wasn't really that great at singing. I was in choir throughout high school. I do want to mention that. I really enjoyed choir, and I found myself to be pretty good at it. I actually went to state with a double mixed quartet and our whole choir, and I believe we won state as the double mixed quartet, or the mixed double is sometimes what you call it. So that is 2 tenors, 2 basses or baritones, 2 altos, and 2 sopranos. If you are in choir, and I don't know how many of you would actually still be in school, but if you're in school and you're in choir, you should try to organize a double mixed quartet. I promise you, it is the most fun you'll have in choir. It is so cool to be paired up with just one other person in your section, and the amount of like intricate harmonies that you can do, and just like, especially if you're doing like old world Latin music, holy crap, dude, it is so much fun. Kind of a choir geek moment there. But anyway, I wanted to mention that I was in choir. My strength was singing with other people. I think that I was a lot more confident when I was singing with other people. And when I would sing by myself, I just wasn't. I was more scared. My throat would tighten up, and it just, anyone who knows what it's like to sing, if your throat is tight, it just doesn't sound good. And that was like me all the time when I was singing by myself. So when I did this benefit concert, I'm singing by myself, and like, there's not really a whole lot of effects on my voice or anything. And it's just a piano, and it is what it is. I'm glad I did it, but it wasn't incredible. And I know that there's a lot of people that probably just forever, no matter how much actual good music I put out from here on out, like, they'll just remember me as that kid. And that's kind of the sucky thing of, growing up in a small town. I actually do want to make a note as well about growing up in a small town. Growing up in small town and moving. Yeah, because I think that's an interesting topic. So yeah, that is, I was on stage a few times, but for the most part, there wasn't a whole lot of like performing going on. It was really just like I would show my parents and my siblings and sometimes my friends whenever I would write a song. And it's crazy because I actually like the bullying that I had dealt with almost my whole life up until this point. After freshman year, when people started to like, recognize that I wrote music, a lot of it dissipated. There were still the guys that had been mean to me for as many years as I can count on two hands, or one hand or whatever. Those guys would still, they were still jerks. But for the most part, like a lot of the constant, like aggressive bullying just kind of dissipated. And that was a huge relief. But it also pissed me off because it was like, wow, it really takes me like being good at like, I was the only one in my school that wrote music. I may not have actually been the only one, but there was nobody else anyone knew of that did it. I wouldn't be surprised if I was the only one because it was a small school. And most kids really cared about sports, even though our music divisions did better than the sports divisions in pretty much everything. It just kind of pissed me off that I had to be good at something and, for people to think that I was like somebody worth something. And, it's like, oh, if you're not good at football or if you can't write music, then we're going to just, beat on you all the time and just constantly like bully you until you hate yourself. Like that was the thing that was really weird for me to deal with at that time, is like the double-edged sword of, oh, I'm like happy. People are recognizing me. People aren't messing with me as much anymore. I feel like I'm worth something. And then there's the other thought of like, why did it take this for people to treat me the way that they should treat me, So it was hard to manage that and hard to cope with that. But yeah, fast forward, my family moved out of state after sophomore year. So sophomore year was a little bit better than the other years. We moved out of state, and junior year was rough because I was in a new school. It was a much bigger school. I was still writing music, but I was exposed to more people, and these people, I wasn't the only one that wrote music now. Like there was a band at my high school in junior year. They were my age, but they seemed a lot older and more mature, and everyone loved them, and they were like kind of nice to me, but I kind of got the vibe that they would talk shit behind my back at the same time. So I had some embarrassing moments with writing music at that school too. I just went from being recognized and things like that to being invisible again. And that was really hard. Like that was really, really difficult. There's a lot more that I want to talk about when in relation to my experience out of state. And I think that I want to save that for episode 2 or part 2, excuse me. So I think I'm going to make this musical journey a 3-part series and it may be only 2 parts. Maybe that's all I'll need. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and I don't want to skip over important things, and I want to reward you for listening to this and, give you something that you can't get anywhere else. So, we're going to wrap it up there. It's 4:20 my time right now, so happy 4:20, everybody. I really, really appreciate you listening. You can follow me at NOLAN.VOID Music on Instagram to keep up to date with everything that I'm doing, music and podcast-wise. I did release an EP just recently. It's called Disconnect EP. You can find it on all streaming platforms. If you want to get the musical perspective behind a lot of the things I'm talking about, or if you just like cool music, then you might like my music. So either way, thanks again. I love you all, and I will see you next time.